And this evening, we would like to extend a special welcome to the Leader of the Opposition and the PNP President, Mark Golding. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
And how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Are you enjoying the job, Comrade Leader?
Yep, I am. You know, it's very challenging, obviously, and there's a lot going on, but we're seeing some progress, and I'm looking forward to bright things.
Do you think you're doing a good job so far? How do you rate your performance?
I believe that to others to do, you know, but I think we're making good progress.
Well, as you say, leave it to others. We saw some reactions in the recent opinion polls, two of them actually, comparing you and Andrew Holness, and Holness looks far better, according to what these people think. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, prior to September last year, I was really not a national figure. I was somebody who was a team player, and I had no real aspirations for leadership. But as things turned out, I was persuaded to put my hat in the ring and was ultimately successful. So there's a process now of ensuring that Jamaica gets to know me, and that is a work in progress. Due to the environment in which we're operating now, it's not easy to be on the ground in the way we would like because of the restrictions and so on, which we must respect. But the good thing from that point of view was that I didn't have a lot of strong negative sentiments. There was a lot of okay, and you know, so I think there's a basis for us to move forward. And you know, I'm going to be increasingly active in the public arena in terms of making myself available to shows like this and so on, so people can get to know me. So, you know, Andrew has been obviously Prime Minister now since 2016. That's his second time round. He's been a public figure for years. So, you know, it's not surprising to me. You were a public figure,
Minister of Justice. You went with ganja. That made you quite popular across the country. So this idea that you were locked away in a little room where nobody saw you isn't really...
No, I think that'd be an exaggeration, obviously. But no, I think that the truth is that, yes, I was in the Ministry of Justice in the Senate, and obviously from that perspective, I was there and in doing public service, but I'd never projected myself. I didn't have an active social media presence, you know, and I wasn't really seen as a contender for leadership because I'd never really...
But that's part of it, isn't it? That people didn't think you wanted it, and they're not sure if you really want it now. You're just there because who else?
Well, I'm there because I put myself forward, and I was successful in the elections, internal elections, and won by a fairly comfortable majority. And I'm, you know, seized the initiative, and I'm moving forward, and we're building the party, and we're doing some positive things. You know, we have established a unity committee to try and resolve some of our issues. That's a work in progress. I was just on a call with a Zoom with a team of mediators that we're building within the party so we can have a much more sustainable internal process. You know, we've established the O.T. Fairclough Trust Fund for party workers, indigent party workers, and it's active and it's doing good work. We've established a junior shadow cabinet to raise the profile of young people in the party, because we know that that's a demographic we have to move forward and attract in a much more aggressive way going forward. And so these are positive things that are happening. And perhaps the most significant thing of all, I think, is the Policy and Vision Commission that we've established under the chairmanship of Professor Tony Bogues, really looking at re-articulating our philosophy in the third decade of the 21st century. You know, we're coming from obviously socialist roots, and that is we're a progressive movement. But what that means today, and how that we articulate that so that our party workers and our supporters understand exactly what we're about, and the policy platform that we're going to be pursuing as we seek to transform the lives of Jamaica and offer them hope for a better future. These are things that will be emerging, and I'm sure that that will help the party to coalesce around you know, strong ideas that will resonate with the people, and that is a work in progress.
All right, we want to talk a little bit more about those things when we come back after this short break. You're watching the panel discussion. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We now continue our special panel discussion with Opposition Leader and PNP President Mark Golding. And I'd like to drill down a bit on this issue you mentioned before we went to break of philosophy of the party. Would you say that democratic socialism is still the binding philosophy of the PNP? And the second part of that is it still relevant in today's Jamaica?
It's in our constitution, and we've been a socialist movement from very early in our existence, from very shortly after formation. Of course, what that means and how it's expressed will vary over time, and it is a flexible idea, but essentially it puts the people in the center of things, and it looks at policies that will uplift those who have been historically disadvantaged and ensures social justice and a strong approach toward centering the idea of equality in terms of access to opportunities and the outcomes that the state can bring for people. So that is why when we are looking at, that's why we would establish a thing like the National Housing Trust or the National Health Fund. You know, these are institutions that have helped people to have houses, help people to have access to healthcare. And those are, and if you look through the history of Jamaica, modern Jamaica, there are so many institutions that have really been charted by the People's National Party and which have really helped to transform the lives of many people. So, you know, the philosophy is there, and it's a strong underlying theme that guides our outlook when we're looking at how to allocate the resources and what the role of the state is. So I think that it's something that will be with us going forward, but it has, of course, not prevented us from embracing the market and business, entrepreneurship, and supporting investment through, you know, and the importance of private enterprise. So it is not, it doesn't take the form that it may have taken during the Cold War era, but, you know, it's still relevant because as the world faces the ongoing challenges of climate change, globalization, and the dislocation of that, and now pandemics and so on, people are increasingly alienated, people are suffering, and, you know, policies that put the people at the center and really look at how to uplift and empower them are still very relevant.
I'm interested that you say that because you do have one Professor Bogues chairing the policy committee who worked rather closely with former Prime Minister Manley. Should we expect a return to a Michael Manley sort of PNP? Well, in light of, given the fact that where we are in the world.
We're in the third decade of the 21st century. There was a Michael Manley of the 1970s, which was during the Cold War. And when he really introduced the policies which I think made Jamaica independent, because independence in 1962 was a formal legal proposition, but it didn't really change the social and structural arrangements of the society until we went through the era of the 1970s. Then, of course, the Cold War ended, and the advent of the Washington Consensus and the dominance of the market forced Manley to adjust, and the flexibility of his own philosophy was sufficient to. And Tony Bogues was part of that process.
In an issue of adjusting, within your policy and vision, what is it that within this policy and vision that you're looking to go towards, how does that apply to moving us out of the situation that COVID has caused? Because it's not just a matter of like overcrowded hospitals, it's also the economic issues as well as the societal issues that it has brought to the front. So how does your party intend to address those issues today and help Jamaicans with this particular issue right now?
Well, for example, COVID has created and exacerbated the inequalities in the education system, so that literally hundreds of thousands of young people who are from relatively disadvantaged homes don't have access to the internet, don't have access to devices. The government has made efforts, but they have been slow and they've been late and they've been poorly rolled out and they haven't been effective. So the whole question of how do we bridge that gap? How do we ensure that our education system is not creating two Jamaicas or further entrenching the divisions in the society? How do we ensure that children from all levels of society, by the time they are supposed to matriculate into secondary school, have achieved the standards that are required, rather than having failing schools or schools that are underperforming and leaving the children severely disadvantaged, and then the social problems that follow from that later on. In communities in which many of Jamaicans live, the housing stock is poor, the infrastructure is poor,
well, with all due respect, Mr. Golding, we know that, we're aware of that. My question is, what is your party going to do? What plans do you, as the leader of this party, intend to put forward to address these issues?
Well, exactly. Our policies are going to be tackling those issues. So we will have to focus on how do we address the problems in the early childhood sector, primary schools, how do we invest in them, how do we ensure that teachers are trained to provide the necessary inputs to the children for the type of world that we're moving into in the fourth industrial revolution, and ensuring that the schools that are For example, in my own constituency, we have 5 primary schools. One of them is doing very well. The other 4 are not doing so well. And there's no effort from the ministry, or inadequate effort to really, in my view, try to uplift those standards. And I think that is not unique to my constituency. And a PNP government would be very focused on trying to ensure that we uplift the standards of those, because it's not just about giving those children a better chance in life, but it's about creating a stronger society, a more cohesive society, a society which won't be plagued with the levels of dislocation and violent crime that thrive and emerge from a society in which there are these divisions and there are these inequalities and there are the hopelessness and dejection that flow from that.
But I want to ask you about how you're going to deal with that. I know you're not here with the policy brief, it's being developed, but people are looking on, especially those who are vulnerable and hurting, and they want to know, so we see what this government is doing. Is this the best there is? What can the PNP offer?
That. Could you try again?
No, clearly this is not the best there is, because if you look at what's happening, for example, in the crime statistics, murders are up 10% this year on year, and the approach that the government has taken to dealing with the problem of violent crime in the country is not working. They try to go the repressive route of states of emergency. They abandoned the programs that we had formulated to try and bring balance to the effort to reduce crime, which is to look at the root causes of crime and try and deal with those in a proactive way through things like Unite for Change, the Peace Management Initiative, and so on. And instead, they've gone heavily to invest in strengthening the military, leaving the police force relatively undermanned and under-resourced, and it is not working. So, yes, the PNP would be focusing on how do we tackle things like that and the root causes of that, and what are the social investments that are required to deal with unattached youths, give them a chance in life in a much more structured and national way, because we don't think you can tinker with these problems. You have to have a major transformational effort to deal with that situation.
You want a bigger social program?
I definitely need a major program for dealing with those youths who have left school without any qualifications, they don't have a job, and their prospects are...
What does that look like? An expanded path or... No,
not an expanded path. It's a program that deals with mentorship, remedial education, training, and some amount of citizenship reorientation. So people, the whole idea would be to create constructive citizens, productive citizens out of youth who would otherwise go into or have a strong chance of going down the path of badness and gunmanship.
So talk about the social program. I want a comment from you on what's happened on the supplementary budget. We see $33 billion in additional spending. 10.3 to health, 5.3 billion for what they say is targeted COVID-related social assistance. You've been calling for more social assistance spending. Is this?
It's a step. It is a step that we approve of, and of course we want to see the mechanisms for the delivery, because we were, the approach that was taken last year with it was very tailored towards ensuring that nobody benefited who shouldn't benefit, and the effect of the bureaucracy and the requirements meant, for example, the very small business operators who were supposed to benefit, many of them couldn't access it because they are not in the formal system and they couldn't formalize to get it. So we want to see an approach which is more focused on in delivering it. And the Capri study showed that many people were unable to access. But yes, the 5.3 billion, I think it is, it's a step in the right direction, and we've been calling for that, and we're glad that those calls have been heard.
When it comes to the economy, pre-COVID, the JLP, rightly so or wrongly so, were credited with the growth in the economy, with the movement of individuals from one economic strata to another, mainly from poor to middle class, upper middle class. And they also seem to be outflanking you on certain issues which have traditionally been your bailiwick, education, social works, etc. So how do you balance keeping the economic sector quiet, or at least mollified, as well as bringing up those who have been traditionally left behind?
Well, the growth record of the government is poor. I mean, the truth of the matter is Jamaica went through the necessary structural reforms under the last PNP administration, which were very challenging, but we left a platform for growth, and we left a strong architecture of structural reforms, especially around the areas of revenue collection and greater fiscal space, which has been generated from that. But the 5 in 4 promise was a complete pipe dream. It never happened. And in fact, in the final calendar year, I think 2019, there was no growth at all. So the economic model needs to be adjusted to one that focuses on strengthening human capital, strengthening the productivity of our people. That is why the investments in the education system, righting the problems in the education system where we have so many young people who go through the system and end up with nothing at the end, to show for that the investment that their parents have made. We need to correct those things. We have to ensure that our training is relevant for the economy that we're building, and try to increase the overall productivity of our people so that we can attract investment and the types of investment that will create better jobs and will create wealth for the people. So it's really a focus which is around putting the people in the center of everything that we do.
Gotcha, but we don't have you every day, but we want to deal with some of the governance and political issues. For instance, local government elections are likely next year. First of all, should they go ahead?
Well, we are preparing for it. It should, as you know, it should have happened. I think February gone was the deadline. It was extended for a year. The Prime Minister indicated that with COVID the way it is, he won't be calling it this year. We'll see whether or not that's true. We are just preparing for it. We don't know when it will happen.
And what's the shape of the PNP to fight it?
Yeah, well, it's coming along. You know, a lot of work is being done. We have put our structures in place across the island, and it's a work in progress. So
you say work in progress. Dr. Brown-Burke has likened PNP to a badly broken down car that needs repairing. How long do you think you're going to have this car up on the blocks?
No, man. I think her metaphor referred to the fact that we got a very bad beating in the September 2020 general elections.
Well, you just kicked out one member, Ms. Cross. Yeah. You just had another one, Ms. Phillips, leave. So, I mean, there does not seem to be that unity there.
Well, I mean, Ms. Cross is somebody who was known to be antagonistic towards the current leadership, and she conducted herself in a way which necessitated the internal structures of the party dealing with it in a forthright way. I was glad to see that the party has shown its capacity to
is this what's going to happen to people who criticize you? You'll kick them out the party?
Not at all, not at all. Nothing to do with that. But there's a way in which any organization must function. You know, if here at CVM, if matters are addressed in a forthright way internally, I'm sure that's permitted. If you go out and undermine the organization, denigrate the leadership of the organization, there must be sanctions and consequences. And I'm happy to see that has been possible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in.